It is Wednesday, April 23rd. It's day 2 of the Karen Read Retrial. Karen Read Trial 2, day 2, take 2. Today, I expect we're going to resume with Kerry Roberts, who was on the stand when we finished yesterday. And then we will see where the day develops. The Commonwealth is going in a completely different witness order than last time. Last time, it seemed they were going in order of arrival to 34 Fairview. And this time, it seems like they are trying to really tell the jury the whole story and then fill in the pieces. But we know that there's still an ongoing fight over ARCA, and that I don't think is going to cease anytime soon because the Commonwealth is just Commonwealthing. So I expect we will see the attorneys talking about that this morning before we even
bring the jury.
It's gonna take a minute. Buckle up for day 2, everybody.
Isn't it true that you were next asked by Mr. Lally in front of the grand jury?
Oh, we
quote,
knew.
What, if anything, did she, Ms. Read, ask Ms. McCabe while they were sitting in the back of the cruiser that you heard? End quote. Remember being asked that question?
No.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Well, we did get a what if anything this trial on day 2.
Yes.
Okay. And in response to that question,
you said,
you stated, quote, at one point she asked her to Google hypothermia and how long Google hypothermia. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
I'm interested to
That was
see.
very detailed. You'll agree that
where
that's a
he's
very
going with that.
detailed and specific recount of an event. You recounted where you were, back of a cruiser, or they were in the back of a cruiser, correct?
Yep.
You were so detailed that you talked about where you were standing next to the cruiser open door, correct?
Yes.
What the others were doing, holding hands and praying, is that right?
Yes.
And the actual words used, you were as detailed about all of that as the actual words used. She asked her to Google hypothermia and how long, and then you stopped, Google hypothermia, end quote, correct?
Correct.
You will agree, at least for that purpose, you painted a very, very detailed picture in front of the grand jury, didn't you?
Yeah.
Except it's not true, is it?
I did not hear her ask that. I was told she was asked that. In
The
the
answer to my question, Ms. Roberts.
but it's not true.
Not a trick question. What you told the grand jurors was not true. You never heard her, my client, ask anyone to Google anything, did you?
I did not.
And yet, that's what you testified to under oath, under penalty of perjury, in front of the grand jury, didn't you?
I did.
And the reason you did that, the reason that you said that false statement was because someone told you to say it, correct?
Object.
Is that, I'm going to let her answer.
Yeah, let her answer
Nobody
it.
told me to say it. I knew it happened at that time,
How did you
which
know
is
it
why I
happened?
said it.
How did you know it happened, Ms. Roberts, if no one told you it happened?
Because we wrote a timeline. We already spoke about
So
that.
the timeline that Jennifer McCabe helped you with, that influenced your testimony in front of the grand jury, correct?
Notice how he used the word influenced.
I was telling what happened in the back of the cruiser.
The timeline
can answer.
you wrote,
So when you ask a question, let her answer, okay?
the timeline you wrote, with Jennifer McCabe's help, influenced your testimony to testify in front of the grand jurors to a statement that you never heard, correct?
Yes.
When you were being interviewed by law enforcement, did you ever
When you were being influenced, interviewed? That was not the slip to make, sir.
All right, Ms. McCabe, I'm sorry.
No! Your Honor, no! Even the judge. Thank you, Miss McCabe. Holy shit. Yesterday, we had very linear, clear testimony from Kerry Roberts. Today, the wheels just came off. I think she tells the clearest recitation of what happens from when she woke up to Karen Read calling her on the phone, through getting to 34 Fairview, to picking up John's phone, to seeing John in the snow, to everything that happened after, including picking up John's parents later, going to the hospital, going back to One Meadows. I think her retelling of that from the last trial was the clearest. She was not cross-examined last time, and she was cross-examined today. And that cross-examination elicited that at almost every point that Kerry Roberts is asked about her story or her memory of the events, Jen McCabe is right there. And the defense tied Jen McCabe to all of those interviews and then brought up grand jury testimony where Kerry Roberts testified in response to Adam Lally's question, starting with what, if anything, did Karen Read ask Jen McCabe while they were in the back of a cruiser that you heard? And her response to the grand jury was that she heard, she said at one point, Karen Read asked Jen to Google, and I wrote it down multiple times because the Google was Google hypothermia or how long, and then it went back to Google hypothermia. So by the time we got through cross-examination, Ellen Jackson's like, but you never heard that. And she said, no, I was told that because she and Jen McCabe sat together before police interviewed Kerry at Jen McCabe's house and put together their timeline. And I think Jackson did a good job of pointing out what she said initially to police, what came in later, when she sat down with Jen McCabe and they started talking about things. On redirect, prosecutor Brennan's like, did anyone tell you not to talk to people about this? No, which is all of my smoke for law enforcement. All the witnesses should have been interviewed separately. And I think Jackson will be able to use this effectively to point out why the investigation wasn't done well. Because memory is impacted by what people tell you. To her credit, Kerry, for most of that questioning, did not back away from, yes, we sat down and talked about it. Yes, I said, I remember this. What do you remember? Yes, we were trying to piece together what happened in a timeline. But once you piece it together, it's real hard to piece back out what you remember and what you were told. And that was very clear when we got to the grand jury testimony, where she testified that she heard Karen Read ask Jen to Google hypothermia, when in fact it was Jen McCabe that told her that Karen Read asked her that. And then it kind of snuck in there that she did in fact see Jen McCabe on the phone. That was in there too. But I don't know if anyone's going to remember it with all the other stuff that was happening. Because it was, so you talked to law enforcement. Who was with you? Jen McCabe. So you were outside the grand jury to give your testimony. Who else was waiting out there? Jen McCabe. So you were here and here and here. Who else was there? Well, I was at Jen McCabe's house. Jen McCabe was in the house, but not sitting with me every single time. To the point that when we got to the end of her testimony, the judge said, thank you, Miss McCabe. I'm sorry, Miss Roberts. But that wasn't the only slip in that testimony, because during redirect, Brennan said, when you were being interviewed, the cross-examination tied together all of the conversations and memories to everyone talking about this together, which I think will effectively be argued. This is why law enforcement should have interviewed everyone close in time to the event, separately, and recorded it. How do you know what anyone remembers? And how do you know what memories were influenced by what people said? And I don't fault Kerry Roberts for trying to figure out what the fuck happened that morning. She was the only one that wasn't at 34 Fairview and out at the bars and the rest of it. Law enforcement didn't tell her, no, don't talk to anyone. So I'm not surprised she was trying to figure out that same day what happened. And she said that the reason they were making a timeline is because Peggy O'Keefe asked her to. We didn't see Peggy O'Keefe testify before, but we're going to today.
I'm showing Jen and Kerry, look what I just did to my light, and I'm worried that there's going to be some kind of electric short circuit. There's like the bulb is showing, and some of the red plastic's missing. So I picked pieces out of the light housing that had kind of collapsed within the light and dropped them in John's driveway.
After we finished up with Kerry Roberts' testimony, we got into the testimony of John O'Keefe's mother, Margaret or Peggy O'Keefe. It was, of course, emotional testimony. This is a witness who has lost not only her daughter and her son-in-law, but also then her other son. So it was emotional testimony when she talked about losing John O'Keefe, when she talked about his life, when she talked about her grandchildren, John O'Keefe's niece and nephew, who lost their mother and then their father and then their uncle, who was their caregiver. She talked about moving to Canton and living in One Meadows Ave and being with the kids. She talked about the morning, getting the call from Kerry Roberts, going to the hospital, going back to One Meadows Ave, and that was the heart of her testimony. But there was some new information in her testimony, including that Kerry Roberts and John O'Keefe went to high school together and went to junior prom together. Never came up in any of Kerry Roberts' testimony or cross-examination, just didn't come up. It seemed to me in Kerry Roberts' testimony from yesterday, oh, we went to high school together, we both played soccer, we kind of knew each other. Okay. I mean, you also went to prom together. It would have been less weird to me if she had said, yeah, we also went to prom together because we were friends. That would have been less odd to me than it being completely not mentioned until John O'Keefe's mother mentioned it. I think that's what made it so much of a, what? That's a little more than oh, we both play the same sport to me. The other thing that was interesting about the testimony is when Peggy O'Keefe was talking about getting to the hospital, she said that she asked a nurse when she saw Karen Read, what is she doing here? And when describing Karen Read's demeanor and statements at the hospital, Peggy O'Keefe said she was loud, not distraught, which other people have said about Karen Read, not upset. It was loud. It seemed to me that there was a distance there and a coldness in her testimony towards Karen Read, but I didn't necessarily read that as since this event, because it wasn't as if there was fondness and distress at the hospital. And then in the years that have passed, that changed, because it seemed to be the true thing at the hospital that Peggy O'Keefe said about Karen Read, who was dating John O'Keefe for 2 years at that point. What is she doing here? Well, why wouldn't she be there? So that distance was interesting and then illuminated when the prosecution tried to bring in multiple video clips. The jury was excused and there was argument over those video clips from 2 different interviews. One of the clips was the 2020 clip.
They had pulled into the driveway before me, so I was presuming she saw my cracked tail light and was thinking, did you hit my son? I could sense from her that she was looking at me very warily. And then when John's nephew came home, I just wanted to see him and squeeze him and hug him. It was quite uncomfortable. I said, Dad, I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I said, I think I need to leave. I said, I think John's mother thinks I did something to John.
And I was surprised that the prosecution wanted to bring that in, because the clip seems to explain why Karen Read was at One Meadows Ave so briefly and why she left. And in light of the testimony from Peggy O'Keefe, the sentiment seemed to match, for me, the way the testimony came in from Peggy O'Keefe, that there was a discomfort there. The prosecution tried to bring in another clip of Karen Read from the outtakes of the Discovery ID series, where Karen Read is mimicking or mocking the way Peggy O'Keefe would have said to her, I think he looks like he's been hit by a car. And the defense argued heavily against that clip coming in. There's nothing else to that clip. The court took it under submission. We'll see what happens tomorrow. I don't think that clip has evidentiary value. The prosecution was trying to argue these clips come in to show consciousness of guilt, to show that Karen Read had a ruse to remove the murder weapon SUV from One Meadows Avenue. He called it the scene, not the scene, and was arguing that these showed that Karen Read was coming up with a ruse. But I think the witness they put on right before that undercuts that argument. So it's an interesting choice of video. And at one point, when Ellen Jackson realized that they were arguing over that first clip that I think explains Karen Read's behavior without her taking the stand, he was like, oh, nope, withdrawn, objection withdrawn.
Do it.
Jackson's like, no, put that in. Put that in. That explains exactly why my client got the fuck out of One Meadows Ave. And I think that it does. The prosecution doesn't see it that way. There are times where I really do struggle to see it the way that they do. So that's where I'm at. You let me know how you see it. I struggle with the way they see it. And then we started getting into testimony of first responders, but not after we had Trooper Garino on the stand briefly to bring in the foundation of cell phone extractions from Karen Read's phone and John O'Keefe's phone. No text messages came in, not further discussion. His testimony wasn't completed. There was no cross-examination by Attorney Alessi yet, but the foundation for Karen Read's phone and John O'Keefe's phone came in. I wonder if we'll see text messages discussed tomorrow. And then we got into the first responder who took Karen Read from 34 Fairview to the hospital for that Section 12 involuntary hold that her father had called in. So we will be continuing with that fifth witness tomorrow morning. I can't believe there would be very many more questions there. And we see a theme growing in the defense cross-examinations, which is, oh, you're the fire paramedic that responded, but you're Kerry Roberts' neighbor. And you guys have served on the board of an organization, not at the same time, but the same organization. And Kerry organizes the block parties in your neighborhood, and you brought the fire truck to the block party, and you went to high school with Trooper Proctor. And Canton's a small town, but you didn't know Karen Read before this. And I think we're going to see that consistency in theme and cross-examinations grow as we move forward. But I think after the fiery morning with Kerry Roberts, will the jury remember the rest of these witnesses if they're not brought up in argument later? Maybe not. Peggy O'Keefe, yes. But the rest of them, it's just giving information until we get to other parts of testimony, which we will be doing tomorrow. So get the Law Nerd app and I'll see you in court tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.